Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I make the time 3 o'clock, and that is the appointed time for our special council meeting this afternoon, and I will call this meeting to order. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders. Just a reminder that this meeting is televised and it is web streamed. And if you do have a cell phone device, if you could just check to see that the audio is turned down or off so it doesn't disrupt us, that would be very much appreciated. Reminder to everyone today that this is a special council meeting, so we are here to only deal with one issue today, and that's the issue that the meeting was called for, which is related to a gas well emergency. You will note that Councillor Oliver and Councillor Sonnenberg will not be in attendance today. They have personal business. They had made commitments prior to my calling for this special meeting this past Saturday, so they will not be in attendance. If you look, councils, please, at your agenda for this afternoon. Item number 4, with your permission, will become item number 3. That's staff report HS 17-22. The hard copy is on your desk, or should be. And then what appears as item 3, I would like to do our presentations as item 4 after the staff report. And we will have one presentation from a delegation from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, which is Mr. Mark Smithson. And item B will not be MNR. They are not in attendance this afternoon, but Mr. Brent Sterling is here from the Office of the Ontario Fire Marshal, and he will give us a presentation. So that will be items 4A and B. And certainly we will then be going at the conclusion of our presentations to closed session, and we'll, as always, finish with the confirming bylaw. It's been moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Geisens that the agenda be approved as I just presented to you. Any questions on that motion or discussion? Those in favor? That sets our agenda. That's carried, and thank you. Before we get to item 3, a few comments from myself. I'd first of all just like to welcome everybody here to this special meeting of council this afternoon. And certainly I'd start by thanking council members for coming in on short notice to be here today. That's very much appreciated. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss and respond to the hydrogen sulfide gas leaks at 2 wells, T009949 and T008725. Both wells, as you know, are located on the south side of Concession 10, west of Silver Hill. I'd like to point out that some today in attendance are residents of Concession 10. So we appreciate you being here, folks. As well, we have representatives from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. The Ontario Fire Marshal representative is here. We have representation from Norfolk County Fire and Rescue, Emergency Medical Services. I'm not sure if there is representation from the Norfolk detachment of the OPP. I don't believe. I've been watching for them. I wasn't sure. And certainly, last but not least, the Haldeman Norfolk Public Health Unit. Our Norfolk County Emergency Task Force has worked many, many hours over the last week in efforts to keep everyone safe and works towards a solution as soon as possible. And I will tell you, Council, I've attended some of those meetings, and this task force is, well, they're spectacular in their dedication to get this job completed. The Emergency Task Force, along with Council, are most grateful to all of the ministries, departments, and individuals that have worked with us to deal with this serious situation. And finally, again, I want to thank the residents of Concession 10 for their cooperation, their help, and their understanding during this difficult time. We thank you for that. I see the purpose of this council meeting as twofold. One, to give council an update on the situation that has transpired, and two, to have council provide direction to staff to enable them to proceed further. So, having said that, I will now turn matters over to you, Mr. County Manager. Mr. Cribbs, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a lot to get to, so I'll try to keep my remarks brief. The only general statement I want to make is that I'm very proud to say that through 5 or 6 meetings now of both the task force and the emergency control group, and a wide range of professionals of all sorts, everyone constantly, the guiding point and focus has been protecting public safety, and everything else has been ancillary, has flowed from that. It hasn't been financial, it hasn't been personal convenience, it hasn't, like, nothing else. That we've had that guiding principle, and that's brought us here to this point today. That being said, you have before you a public report. We've tried as best we can to provide you with a general synopsis of how we've got to where we are today. You'll note there's a section in there we call items for council's consideration and or direction. So these are two things we would like to suggest that council turns its mind to. This report, though, in a technical sense, is an information only. One could simply receive and file it. You don't have to take any actions today. We are recommending some things for you to think about. And the reason the things are in the report are we think these are worth discussing on. But as a practical and a procedural matter, this was not designed to fetter your conversation, your dialogue, your discourse. It's a starting point, and anything pertaining to this you can discuss, or you can take this where you want it to go. These are things, it goes for the in-camera as well. The in-camera, we've identified some things that we think should be of a sensitive nature should be discussed behind closed doors, and that those are the appropriate topics, but really, to a large degree, these are educated guesses by your staff about what you'd want to know, about the sort of things you want to make decisions on. So if we've missed anything, or there's anything you want to talk about, it wasn't an effort to sort of channel the discussion anywhere. It was just oversight on our part. We're really flying pretty quickly here. So to that end, I do certainly, although I hope you have an opportunity to read it all and take it all in, at some point, I do hope you consider the items for council's consideration and or direction. One pertains to money. We are specifically asking that you set up some amount of money for us to access during the course of what has come and what will come yet. And secondly, sort of political considerations for strategic operations going forward. And we seek your advice there too. All of that being said, and unless you have specific questions about what I've just suggested to you, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ms. Miranda and to the public health world, if I may.
Thank you, Mr. Cribbs. And Marlene, if you're ready to give us your report and any comments, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'd like to start off with the report by introducing the two ministry reps that are with us this afternoon. Mr. Mark Smithson from the Ministry of Environment. He is the Supervisor of Air, Pesticides and Environmental Planning, and he's here to my right. Okay. And the second person that I'd like to introduce is Mr. Brent Sterling from the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office, and he's a program specialist that's also been working with staff diligently. So Brent is also in council chambers. So I'd like to welcome them and thank them for all their ongoing dedication and support that they've provided to the staff over the last couple of weeks. So this report is for information only, and I will walk you through the report in more detail than we typically do, as I recognize that it was just distributed this morning. So last week, we did present through the Board of Health meeting report HS 1721 to apprise the Board of Health of a concern of hydrogen sulfide levels near the Langton area. This report is a further update to that report as the situation has evolved and has escalated. As Mr. Cribbs has mentioned, there is a companion closed session report that will follow this report. As a reminder, hydrogen sulfide gas is colorless, toxic, and flammable, and part of the natural environment. It is detected typically by smell, even by very low concentrations in the air, ranging from 0.0005 to 0.3 parts per million. These levels in the air are not dangerous and will not cause negative health effects. However, it should be noted that there is no way to tell by smell alone of those concentrations, and in fact, concentrations around 100 parts per million will temporarily eliminate one's olfactory sense from prolonged exposure. Hydrogen sulfide levels are variable based on a number of factors such as fluctuations from the source and in specific weather patterns. Therefore, individuals exposed to hydrogen sulfide can and will also experience fluctuating levels. If I could refer to the maps in front of you on your board and on the screen there. Last week, both the Ministry of Environment and the Ontario's Fire Marshals started monitoring the air qualities at different locations in the affected 400-meter radius at the first evacuated site that we evacuated last week. Mid-afternoon on August the 25th, on Friday, the Ontario Fire Marshal identified a hydrogen sulfide level of 56.8 parts per million near another well, T008725. And if you look on the map, it's the one that's most southerly on the map here. The OFM staff returned to the site with full protective equipment and appropriate monitoring to test the area and test for additional wells in the vicinity. At that point in time, around 8:20 p.m. in the evening on Friday, another level at the same site or around the same site of this new well was monitored to be at 177 parts per million. The OFM returned again on Saturday for further monitoring and have been assisting us over the last several days as well. Given this new information, a second 400-meter exclusion radius was established based on the first responders' emergency response guide for hydrogen sulfide. An additional 3 civic addresses were affected within this second radius. As per Dr. Locke's recommendation, our medical officer of health, there was a recommendation to evacuate these 3 additional civic addresses, and we did speak with the families and advise that an official order would be issued in the morning. On Saturday, August 26th, Norfolk County activated their emergency control group to respond to the gas leaks. An additional 3 orders were officially issued by Dr. Locke, and with a total of 6 homes now being impacted and evacuated from the affected area. To protect the safety of the local residents, North Walsingham Concession 10 was closed between Forestry Farm Road and East Quarter Road until September the 5th. At this time, an order to evacuate has been delivered to the 6 households, as I've mentioned, with the 2 overlapping meter radiuses. So if I again refer you to the map, you can see where the 2 wells are, and our GIS team has identified 2 areas that do technically overlap, or that do overlap in this affected area. 4 households have complied with the order to evacuate, and 2 households continue to enter the affected area. Staff are working with the affected residents in need of accommodations. Staff did meet with the affected residents yesterday and will continue to do so regularly to apprise them of developing information and to answer any questions that they may have. It is important to note that air monitoring remains a priority, as it is essential to enable the medical officer of health and staff to make informed decisions of the safe and unsafe levels of hydrogen sulfide gas. The MOE has currently provided continuous monitoring and point-in-time monitoring on the periphery of the two 400-meter radiuses. The OFM is currently monitoring the air quality within the 400-meter radiuses. Modeling is being developed. Additionally, the MOE will be installing a meteorological tower station and is looking into other options on behalf of the county for ongoing monitoring. It is important to note that the mandates of both of these respective organizations are to respond to short-term emergency management. Ongoing monitoring is beyond their regular mandate and is unlikely to continue to occur. Related to the remediation of the two specific wells identified, the Ministry of Natural Resources has confirmed that the tendering process for the well T009949, known to us as the original site affected, has expedited and was confirmed that the contractor has been secured. The MNR and the contractor are preparing a plugging plan and developing a safety plan so that capping of this well can occur in short order. It is understood that this well capping will commence later this week. Related to the newly identified well of Friday T008745, this is a licensed commercial producing well, which differs from the previous well. The MNR are working with the owner-operator to test and/or remedy the well. At this time, the scope of the work and the timeline have not been confirmed. Again, public safety remains our top priority. The road will remain in place with such time as the source of hydrogen sulfide has been remedied to safe air quality levels. Access into the site is prohibited without the appropriate monitoring and personal protective equipment. This includes all motorized vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, horses, or water vessels. Signage will be installed this week to advise people of the risks of entering this area. Mr. David Cribbs has advised of some items for consideration or direction, either in financial and political consideration, that are in the report for your consideration. Staff continue to work collaboratively with many ministries, agencies, and community partners to expedite the return of the residents to their home and to ensure the safety of air quality. We are very grateful for the support of these respective agencies, and we'd like to thank them. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miranda, for this report and all the work putting this together. I was going to say the last 24 hours, less than that. Thank you very much for your work. Open for any questions on this report to members of council. Councillor Columbus, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Marlene, obviously this is costing the county and someone else some time and energy and money. Do you feel that there's going to be any financial assistance from the province for what efforts we have to make to put this to rest?
Mr. County Manager, would you respond?
I will direct part of the council's attention to part of the in-camera agenda as reasons why we'd like to not provide a fulsome answer to you at this time. Beyond that, though, as a general proposition, it must be said to you, and this was said based on the last report last week, there are absolutely no guarantees. We are in it's fair to generally state that this is an area where there's some provincial jurisdiction, there's very little municipal jurisdiction other than where ultimately we deliver all the safety services and during emergencies, it's the municipality that's to rise to the occasion and lead the charge, if you will. But financially, I can indicate the province does have a disaster relief fund. I don't have all the specifics on that. I can defer that portion of an answer to finance. I don't think we're going to rise to the level of cost that will allow us to access that fund, but I'll defer that part of the answer to Amy Fanning, our Deputy Treasurer. The bottom line is there's no guarantee. There is some possibility, and that would be my general comment.
Yes, through the chair, Mr. Cribbs, you are correct. The province does have a municipal disaster recovery program. In order to qualify for that program, municipal expenditures must reach at least 3% of our levy, which for us is a substantial dollar amount. And because we don't have a timeline or all of the answers yet, we don't know that we'll reach that level. And I'm in agreement with Mr. Cribbs' assessment that I don't know that we'll qualify for that or not.
Thank you, Amy. Go next to Councillor Brunton, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Luke. I guess my question is, Marlene, when you were mentioning the well, I think T008725, you mentioned four something.
Yeah, the report, the 4 should be a 2. Okay, in her report, I believe she mentioned 4.5, it's 2.5.
So it's the 2 identified on the map.
2 on the map, her
Okay.
report should read 008725.
Okay, and
Just
did
a typo.
Okay, did I hear right, too, that the ministry are in the works of capping these?
I'll let Marlene repeat what she has said as far as where we're at with the capping, and I think she referred to one well at this time. Marlene, I'll let you explain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Brunton, these are 2 different types of well. So the first well that was identified a week and a half ago or so, T009949, is it is an abandoned well. It does not produce, so it is being remedied under the Abandoned Work Program by the Ministry of Natural Resources. So that well and the remediation of that well is currently underway. In conversations with the Ministry of Natural Resources and the urgency of having to have had evacuated civic addresses, they have expedited the tendering process, and they are in conversations with the homeowners to be able to access the site and be able to start that remediation in short order. They will have to prepare a plugging program with the contractor. They will have to develop a safety program as well to ensure the safety of the workers, anyone that may be in the vicinity, and then they will proceed to cap that well. So that well and that work is optimistically going to be started at the end of this week. The other well that was identified as a concern last week is a commercially licensed well, and is the owner-operator who owns that well, and it does go under different criteria. That well does need to be fixed. It has been identified. The owner-operators are working with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to determine what that is. However, at this point in time, we don't have an appreciation for the scope of that work or the timeline associated with that work, unfortunately. We are hopeful that in the next few days, more information will be forthcoming.
Okay, so there are people looking into that, though.
Through the mayor to Councillor Brunton, yes, there are people looking into that well as well.
Okay, and my last question is the parties that have been evacuated. Dr. Locke, he's the one that gave that order?
Through the mayor to Councillor Brunton, that is correct. Under his authority, under the Health Protection and Promotion Act, under Section 13, he does have the authority to order evacuation if there is a health risk to those in question. So he did issue initially 3 orders, and on Saturday morning formally did issue 3 additional orders.
So those are in writing to those individuals?
Through the mayor to Councillor Brunton, that is correct.
Okay, and are they obligated to leave, or do they leave on their own accord? When you issue that order, how does that work? I understood some of them did not wish to leave. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Brunton. Yes, the order is under Section 13. If there's a community issue which has a potential to inflict damage on persons or people, then I can make the order to vacate that property. I made it quite clear when I issued this order that in fact the order calls for a fine of $5,000 a day if people that are given the order do not follow through. But I made it quite clear that I had no intention, mainly because I did not have specific numbers at the residences to substantiate that people were in danger. This was a potential because, as Marlene pointed out earlier on, the disbursement of this gas depends on a lot of meteorological conditions, particularly the wind. And the wind this week has been in an unusual situation, as I understand. It's been from the northeast, which would take from the first well, the T009949, it would actually take it away from the residence and the barn. But the prevailing wind here, I believe, is from the south-southwest. And if that wind changes around, which was predicted for around this time or tomorrow this week, it would be coming from the south-southwest and then blowing towards the residences, which would then, of course, increase the concentration of hydrogen sulfide in the residences and put people at risk. But I had no intention of moving forward to... If the order is not obeyed, then I have to pursue that again through the Superior Court and ask for an injunction. And I made it quite clear to the residents when this order was issued that I had no intention of going there, but I had a strong recommendation that they get out of the property. The other reason for issuing this order was the fact that we were informed earlier on by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry that it was going to be at least a 45-day period between issuing the proposal for plugging and starting any remediation process. This seemed to be an awfully long time to me to continue to expose people where we knew the levels were potentially high, to continue to expose them. So that was the second reason for issuing the order, to try to expedite the process of plugging that well, which it has done.
So thank you for your explanation. I just want to get it clear in my own mind then. So you've issued an order to tell them there's a health hazard, but they are not obligated at this time to leave. Is that safe to say? It's their decision?
It's really, the order is an obligation for them to leave, but if they choose to not abide by the order, I am not going to pursue further action on that.
Okay, and that was issued in writing, you said, correct?
I'm sorry, pardon?
That order was issued in writing?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Locke. Thank you, Councillor Brunn. Both Councillor Geisen's next, and then Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Brunton answered every question that I had, so no sense in doing it again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, first of all, before I make my comment, I want to congratulate our local media for the wonderful job that they have done in getting the message out to the people in Norfolk County. And I just wondered if we have encountered any experiences where this has gone larger than Norfolk County. Have we had anybody from other news media calling us and getting information on the seriousness of this situation?
I can only respond for myself. I did have a phone call, excuse me, on Saturday from CTV in Kitchener, and that's been my only, other than local press, the only contact. I don't know if staff have anything to add to that, Marlene?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was also contacted by CTV, and there has been some media in CBC as well. I don't believe necessarily that they've spoken to staff, but the information has been in the media there as well.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Black?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. And just wondering through you to staff, I know there's contaminants in the air, but is there any contaminants on the ground? Is there anything of a liquid nature that spills onto the ground and would require cleaning up? And do we have an idea, if that is the case, how much that would cost and who's responsible for that?
Doctor?
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I can speak to that. The main thing that we're concerned about is this gas. The gas is, it's one of its physical properties is it's heavier than air, so it tends to lie near the ground, but it doesn't precipitate onto anything necessarily, and we're not aware of any other contaminants. You will see that the Ministry of the Environment classify this as a spill. And a spill can be to the ground or can be to the air. So any emissions to the air, etc., is still classified as a spill, but not in the sense that we would understand a spill.
Thank you. Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I'm on page 4 of 6 of our agenda, the second paragraph, and it mentions here, Council should consider if and how a political dialogue with the province should be initiated. And there's some options there. I'm wondering if our county manager couldn't expand on some course of action or what he's looking for specifically from council to direct the province to help us out with this.
Part of the reason that material's in there is so that council can provide some instruction on stylistically how they might like to approach that. It seems, and also we're partially premature because we need to get further in the process to know exactly how well cooperation does or does not go. That being said, there's certainly some need, I think, to bring in those with decision-making power at the highest level in the provincial government to make them aware of the challenge and struggle that is occurring here. There are different mechanisms to do that, which include direct communication to them or through the use of, we do have a member of provincial parliament, and that presumably falls within the job function. So strategically, there's a decision that has to be made about how we'd like to proceed with engaging Her Majesty, either directly through different ministries or directly through the political apparatus, if you have a preference there. And then we will do our best to comply and engage that. But it really comes down to a sort of a philosophy of how you might like to engage, and that's where we're looking for a little bit of guidance. I think technically we know how to speak to the ministries we interact with, but how you'd like us to go about that, we're in that piece, we're looking for some guidance.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, has our local MPP been informed and have calls been made to the minister of the respective divisions?
I can state with confidence that we haven't spoken to any cabinet minister or any deputy minister or above, so that has not happened. We've been in contact, ongoing dialogue with employees of the Office of the Fire Marshal, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, but that's at the sort of regional level, if you will. To the best of my knowledge, we have not engaged the services of our member of provincial parliament.
Okay, thank you. Is that because you need a direction from council to do so?
No, sir. In fairness, all we've been doing is boots on the ground, dealing with the heart of the emergency. We just haven't got to the point where we've been able to take a breath to even start thinking about the higher order, sort of what I'd describe as the political and the communications piece. We're not there yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Marlene, do you wish to add to that, please?
I just, thank you, Mayor Luke, to Councillor Height. I just wanted to let Council know that Dr. Locke and staff, we have been communicating with Public Health Ontario and consulting with him, with a Dr. Ray Copes. Dr. Ray Copes is the Director of Environment. He's a wealth of information, and he has supported our decision-making, or Dr. Locke's decision-making in the current situation, and he's readily available for assistance to us. Furthermore, Dr. Locke has communicated with the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. David Williams, and we are in conversations with him as well to apprise him of the situation.
Councillor Columbus, please.
Mr. Mayor, I believe you mentioned that this meeting is being live streamed, is it? So hopefully the ministry people that could make it, maybe they're listening and they're can relate to our concerns about this problem, being that we got the technology to do that. On this map, it talks about capped gas wells, but I don't see one capped gas well. It's in the blue, bottom right-hand corner. Was that just missed, or is there no capped gas wells in this area of concern?
I can answer that, Councillor Columbus. I too observed that when I got this map. This is only a section of map. This is a general index that's used on these types of wells. There are different, on these wells, or I should say map indicating wells, there are different layers. Also, we were told of wells that appear on the maps, but on this particular map, there doesn't indicate any capped gas wells. I looked it over carefully.
Do you think we can expect more of these happenings in the future, being that we got one and a second one?
Through the mayor to Councillor Columbus, that is questions that we have been posing, and what that might look like if a gas well is capped, what the geological response to that would be. So those are conversations that we're having to determine what this might look like for other sites.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Black.
Mayor Luke, just wondering through you to staff, how was this discovered? Is it reported by a resident or somebody driving through, or how?
Through the mayor to Councillor Black, this was discovered. The health unit received a letter from the Grants, who are the owners of the first well, to seek guidance of what their health issues would be. So we were apprised of that in late July, early August.
July. And just wondering, how long has it, do we have any idea how long either one of these wells have been leaking?
Through the mayor, through Councillor Black, through the owners of the first well, they have experienced hydrogen sulfide odor, etc., for a year and a half to 2 years is what they're advising us of.
Okay, and based on that, it sounds like there may have been some exposure to the residents in that area for a prolonged period of time. Is there any way of monitoring their health?
That was the first question I asked, because there were the Ministry of Natural Resources and the MOE did not have any current levels of this gas that were taken. I put this question both to the MNR and also MOE. The MOE responded very quickly and got a air sampling machine out there, but prior to that, there were no data. So, as Marlene said, the issue had been going on for 18 months to 24 months, but it had only been a real problem with symptoms being associated with the exposure in the last few months. So something must have happened in the last few months to cause the residents of the initial well there to suffer some symptoms from this. And that's how it came to our attention, and that's how we started to gather the data from the Ministry of the Environment.
So these residents in the area have sought medical assistance and by doctors with evaluate?
Not to my knowledge.
That might be an important thing to do.
Any further questions? Moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Geisens that staff report HS 1722, hydrogen sulfide air monitoring at natural gas wells near Langton, Ontario, be received as information. Any discussion? Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. We'll now go to item 4 of our agenda, presentations. Our first presentation is from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Mark Smithson, if he could come to the podium, please. Thanks, Mark. And we thank you for attending this afternoon, Mark, and we appreciate you being here. So the microphone has been turned on for you. And presentations are 10 minutes, and if we have to go longer, we'll ask a leave of council. So welcome, Mark, and the floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, I really don't have a presentation for you. I'll just recap. The Medical Officer of Health, Public Health Unit requested the Ministry's Environment's assistance in conducting air monitoring. We deployed instruments at the Grant Farm on the 9th. We monitored at the barn location for 2 days. We found elevated levels beyond what we consider upper risk thresholds for Ontario Regulation 419, ambient air quality regulation, and levels also were above the level 1 of the acute exposure guidelines of US EPA. We promptly communicated with the health unit. They requested that we move the monitor closer to the home. We continued to monitor and provided the health unit with regular updates on our data. We monitored at that location until August the 25th, which time we moved the monitor out, did some servicing on it, and once working with Norfolk Fire Department and Health Unit, selected a new location at the edge of the current exclusion zone or evacuation zone. That we have repositioned our monitor at address 1640 10th concession. We finished installation on that yesterday. We only have about 8 hours. Well, when my staff did a summary of the data for me this morning, the highest level that we've observed there so far is 1.87 parts per billion, or 0.0018 parts per million. So, so far we haven't seen elevated levels there. We're preparing routine reports for the health unit. In addition to that monitor, yesterday I had my emergency response vehicle, which I have outfitted with a hydrogen sulfide monitor. We went to the farther, to the western side of the 10th concession and monitored at the edge of the 400-meter evacuation zone there. All our readings were low. I believe, off the top of my head, the peak reading that I observed was around 4 ppb, so that would be 0.004 ppm. We were only there for a short period of time. I'm currently working on getting a second fixed monitor to deploy, and once I have that system ready, I will consult again with the health unit, Dr. Locke, and fire to find an appropriate location for that monitor. We're making arrangements to have these monitors deployed in a fashion that the data will be telemetered out and emails will be provided if a reading exceeds a trigger level, which will be established by the health unit, so that there will be immediate notification. I have a limited number of email addresses that I can send that to, unfortunately, before my system crashes. So there will be a person from the health unit, Dr. Locke, a person from fire, and then I have to save a couple for my organization, so we keep tabs on what's going on. So we wish to continue to support Haldeman as long as we can on this, and as Marlene mentioned, I and my staff are working on looking at some other monitoring options that may be appropriate for the county in a more long-term position. Any questions from?
Very much, Mark, and we appreciate that update, and I'll see if there's any questions from members of council. I'll start with Councillor Columbus and then Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a long time since we met before.
It has,
I think
through
it
the
was
mayor to
40
Councillor
years ago in
Columbus.
the tobacco field.
Yeah.
Right, unbelievable. Mark, have your ministry, obviously, have you had much experience with this situation in other parts of Ontario? I noticed there's something about Leamington issue. Have you had much experience? And can you say something about, you mentioned working cooperatively with the health unit, but what about MNRF? Where are they in all this?
Through the mayor to Councillor Columbus. The Ministry of Environment and Climate Change is not the regulator with respect to oil and gas wells in Ontario. That responsibility falls to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. There was an incident in Leamington. I am not personally up to speed on everything that happened there, although it is my understanding that while that particular well was not an oil and gas well, but a drinking water well that was impacted. In that instance, again, I don't have a lot of information on that, but it's a bit different than what we're facing here in Norfolk County. In that instance, I believe the municipality involved took over and hired contractors to undertake their monitoring.
Thank you. Councillor Brunton?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Thank you, Mark, for being here. You heard our manager, Marlene, indicate in her report that this well 9949 may be looked at by Friday, correct?
Again, the capping operations that are going to be undertaken are the responsibility of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry,
Right.
so I would not, it's not appropriate for me to comment on their scheduling on that, so I don't want to.
Okay. That's fair. My question is, like, does your ministry, if all these readings become excessive, like, do you dialogue with MR and F ministry to say, listen, we got problems at this other well? Is that how it works, or?
Through the mayor to Councillor Brunton?
Yes.
I'm
yes.
terrible with names, my apologies. We will be monitoring at the periphery
Yeah.
of the exclusion zones. If we find levels, well, we're going to be reporting our data to the medical officer of health, the health unit, and the fire department. They will have established trigger levels, and based on whether those triggers levels are exceed, they will go to the next step. It's my understanding that once a contractor is on site and starts working on these wells, as part of their occupational health and safety plans, they will be doing monitoring in the vicinity of their work and establishing zones within those zones with respect to personal protective equipment and activities there, sir. And that's out of my realm.
But, like, do you dialogue with the other ministry?
All of through the mayor to Councillor Brunton, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the County of Norfolk, and Public Health, and Dr. Locke have had, I don't want to even guess on how many calls we've had in the last little while, working together cooperatively to keep each other informed and to ensure that we're moving this forward in, as best we can in providing for the health and safety of the public.
Well, I guess, if I may, Mayor Luke, looking at this one map here, there's an awful lot of wells right concentrated around the ones that have the problems, it would appear, on this map.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And my question, I guess, is if this group possibly come in Friday and look at this problem to maybe cap it, if that's what they have to do, would they not, the ministry orchestrates all that work to be done. If they see some other problems, I assume they will address them, would they not?
Through the mayor to Councillor Brunton, I'm not the appropriate person to ask that question of, sir. Again, my role here is to provide monitoring support for the county and the medical officer of health and the public. I apologize, but I don't have those answers, and I can't make commitments for that. The Ministry of Environment, or sorry, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry.
Thank you.
Councillor Black, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, and thank you, Mark. I just wondered, here at Norfolk County, we do have an emergency group, and it's made up of quite a number of staff members and councilors and the mayor. And ultimately, I guess, you know, it's all the information is filtered to an individual for reporting information to the public. Do we have the same process going on with the province? Like, you're telling us that you don't know this or don't know that. Who does know it? Like, is there a coordinating I'm trying to, not putting you on the spot. I don't mean that. Is there a coordinating individual that's sort of overseeing the different ministries that are involved? The same at our level, we have different departments involved. So is there a coordinating body, person?
Through the mayor to Councillor Black, in the current situation that we're in, my senior management group is briefed on a regular basis of my activities and my interactions with the other ministries, the county, and other agencies that are involved in this.
Councillor Geisens?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I'm looking at the 10th concession, the exclusion zone. Did I hear you say that you are going to set up monitors on the outside of each one of those zones?
What
good does that do, I guess, is my other question, sorry.
An exclusion zone has been established. My staff and our role treating this as a spill situation. If we were, think of it as an industrial fire, if we had a large warehouse complex on fire in Norfolk County, and the fire department issued a shelter in place or an evacuation order in a certain zone, but they called the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change for monitoring support. My staff, my role is that we would come to that location and monitor outside of that up to the edge of it to confirm that and provide data so that further decisions could be made by the first responders who have the responsibility to decide on the size of their exclusion zone. My staff are not equipped nor prepared to go inside an exclusion zone. We are not a first responder to those things.
I guess I still have a problem with how does that really help us, I guess, and I can understand that you can't go in, but theoretically, what happens if something were to happen and that would go further? Would you then have to move the monitor out, or would you?
The way that we're setting them through the mayor to the councillor, we are establishing these monitors in locations to get us as close as we can to these things in a downwind direction. We are setting them up so that they have wireless communication and alarms so that we can notify the first responders in the county of changes in the situation so that they can make decisions. If levels got to a point, again, I can't comment on that. My monitors are there. I do have a mobile emergency response vehicle that I could use further out or to fill in gaps at the edges of the of those perimeters. It would be the decision with respect to the county, the medical officer of health, and the board of health as to what to do with moving them out.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Brunton?
Well, if I may, Mayor Luke, there's an important party that aren't here, and I think they might have some of the answers that council might like to hear, but I'm quite disappointed that the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry are not here.
Well, that was their decision to not attend. They were invited, and I don't think there's anyone here that can speak for them. So, but I appreciate your comment. Any further questions to this gentleman? Mark, again, we really appreciate you being here to answer questions and for the information you brought. Thank you.
Through the mayor to all the councillors, thank you for allowing me to come.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Our next presentation is from Mr. Brent Sterling. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, he is here from the Ontario Fire Marshal's office. Welcome.